welcome everybody to our very first inauguration of the committee. How do we promote peace? The Red Cross is here to provide help and hope. And tonight we celebrate the launch of a very exciting initiative. I am your co-host, Anne-Marie Christopher Joseph, and it's my pleasure to welcome our very distinguished panel, Justice Francis Bell, Justice of Appeal, UNTT judge and mediator who joins us from Barbados, Mr. Hubert Peer, the President of the Red Cross St. Lucia, Dr. Stephen King, representative of RISE and a community leader, boards of the Red Cross, volunteers, and our members. Welcome. Marva, if you can just introduce our new team.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Marva O'Culey, and I'm your co-host. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our Conflict Resolution and Legal Committee. And I allow you to watch the screen to where you would see who our members of the committee are. Icebreaker.
Before we dive into our main agenda tonight, let's kick off with a quick icebreaker, getting to know who we are and who's here. I'm going to ask a question. If somebody could monitor the chat just to let us know the feedback. Quick fire question, your name and where you're from. The question is, if you could restore or resolve any conflict in history or community dispute, what would it be? Any dispute at all that you could resolve, and why? Anybody in the audience wants to share with us?
Okay. Carlos George thinks that World War I he would try to solve World War I so that there would never be a World War II. And Kalani Mitchell says that the rights to one's belief and the respect due to one's cultural beliefs as we see it today is one of the major issues that they would try to resolve. Dorothy Agard also thinks that land disputes, if they could solve one thing, it would be land disputes. And Melissa Alexander would want to solve crime.
And there's one common link in all those conflicts. It's what? Communication. Agreed? And it's about sharing your perspective, listening, and learning from others. So that is what we're about, and that is how we want to develop as a Red Cross. So how does the new committee fit into the Red Cross mission? Marva.
The Red Cross, as we all know, was born in a battlefield, and our objective has been to alleviate human suffering, protecting life and health, and ensuring, most of all, respect for human beings. Our new Conflict Resolution and Legal Committee also seems to embrace these goals of promoting peaceful resolutions in our communities. However, to further explain, I invite Mr. Pierre to speak to us more about the role of the Conflict Resolution Committee and the St. Lucia Red Cross. Mr. Pierre?
Thank you too. Thank you both. Good evening to all, those in studio and those in the comfort of your homes listening. Born out of war, and in the effort to promote peace, the Red Cross lives on and thrives. The main aim of the Red Cross is to alleviate human suffering and protect their dignity. Of course, as we have broader goals, we would work together, and these goals, which can be found in youth activity, health and disaster services, for example. There are, of course, new challenges to society that the Red Cross must seek to address presently if it is to remain relevant in this technological age. The spiraling of violence and, of course, human trafficking and migration are amongst the greatest challenges and also opportunities for the Red Cross. Faced with these challenges, it became absolutely necessary for the Red Cross to develop and implement new strategies. The Conflict Resolution and Legal Committee is formed by the Red Cross primarily to help individuals resolve disputes in an amicable manner. We at the Red Cross do place our trust and confidence in this new committee, which is made up of professionals sworn to confidentiality. They are integral to the further success of the St. Lucia Red Cross. It must be further noted that the St. Lucia Red Cross itself plays a crucial role in providing humanitarian assistance, promoting health and well-being, and supporting vulnerable populations. A well-defined conflict and a legal process offers numerous benefits to the St. Lucia Red Cross itself. One, it will enhance the organization's integrity. Two, improve operational efficiency. Three, protection of human rights. Four, strengthen partnership and collaboration. Five, enhance accountability and transparency. Six, support for volunteer and also staff, which is of immense importance. And finally, sustainability and long-term impact. Conflict is an inevitable part of human interaction, believe it or not. Whether it's a disagreement with a colleague or heated argument with a loved one, conflicts can arise in various aspects of our lives. Peace, justice, and strong institutions guide one effective approach to resolving conflicts, focusing on finding solutions that satisfy all parties involved while maintaining respect and understanding. However, what truly determines the outcome of these conflicts is how we choose to handle and resolve them. One approach that aims for a peaceful resolution is peaceful conflict resolution. This method focuses on finding a solution that can satisfy all parties involved while maintaining respect and, of course, understanding. At its core, peaceful conflict resolution involves addressing conflicts in a calm and non-confrontational manner. It requires acknowledging and respecting the different perspectives and emotions at play. By adopting this approach, individuals can create an environment conducive to open communication and collaborative problem solving. To conclude, the conflict and legal process are integral to the successful operations of the St. Lucia Red Cross. They provide a solid foundation for ethical conduct, efficient operation, and effective humanitarian response. By upholding these processes, we ensure that the St. Lucia Red Cross can continue to fulfill its mission with integrity, accountability, and respect for the communities we serve. The St. Lucia Red Cross has a determination to foster a culture of peace and to protect lives and dignity, and there is no doubt in my mind that such a committee would not only help enhance peace, but also save lives. Guided by our fundamental principles and social cooperative responsibility, we believe that we should do all in our power to reduce risk in all shapes and forms. I thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Peer, for that vote of confidence. A couple of messages coming out there, remaining relevant to society, opportunity for strategy. So we're all very excited and looking forward to this new journey. Marva is going to now introduce our guest speaker. Over to you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. I know it's the time that you mentioned I would be introducing the guest speaker, but it's my pleasure to introduce the person who is going to introduce the guest speaker. It's Deborah Maloney. She's a member of the Conflict Resolution and Legal Committee, and she's also the Regional Mediation Coordinator for the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. Welcome, Deborah.
Good evening, everyone. It is my esteemed pleasure to introduce our featured speaker for this evening's program. Honorable Justice Francis H.V. Bell, a native of Barbados, presently serves as a Justice of Appeal of the Supreme Court of Judicature of Barbados and a half-time judge of the United Nations Dispute Tribunal. Justice Bell advises the Court-Connected Mediation Office in Barbados. He is a senior fellow and works closely with the Weinstein International Foundation, which trains mediators and organizes mediation workshops and meetings all over the world. Justice Bell has done most of his mediation work in the Eastern Caribbean, commencing in the British Virgin Islands in 2002, where he engaged a Canadian firm, the Stidfeld Handy Group, to train 12 persons to become mediators. Thereafter, Justice Bell began to promote the idea of mediation in the British Virgin Islands community and in the courts, and became a member of the committee which planned the rollout of court-connected mediation in the British Virgin Islands. Following this experience, on his elevation to the bench in 2003, Justice Bell chaired court-connected mediation committees in Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis, and St. Lucia, before returning to Barbados, where he assumed the position of Justice of Appeal in January of 2020. Whilst developing his interest in mediation, Justice Bell applied for and was awarded the Weinstein Jams International Fellowship in 2014. This fellowship opened his eyes to the potential of mediation facilities in communities in need of accessible conflict resolution programs. Although the issue in the Eastern Caribbean was not primarily street violence, this experience taught Justice Bell that mediation in the court system was not enough. Therefore, he involved himself in public campaigns to engage business people, community leaders, sports clubs, and students to make use of mediation to settle their differences. His activities also led to the formation of the St. Lucia Mediation Forum, which continues to encourage the use of mediation outside of the courts. More recently, Justice Bell has assisted St. Lucian institutions such as the Cooperative Choice Group, a farmers group, and the Resolvers, the brainchild of a young mediator, with their work in planning and implementing education programs in mediation and conflict resolution. Justice Bell has advised on a draft Community Mediation Act in St. Lucia and a draft practice direction for online mediation in Barbados. He holds a bachelor's degree in History and Social Sciences from the University of the West Indies Cave Hill Campus, Barbados, a Bachelor's of Laws degree from the University of the West Indies Cave Hill Campus in Barbados, a Certificate of Legal Education from the Norman Manley Law School in Jamaica, and as previously mentioned, a master's degree in conflict analysis and resolution from Nova Southeastern University, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, USA. Justice Bell is married and has 3 children. He's an avid Qigong and Tai Chi practitioner and also walks for exercise. Justice Bell, we warmly welcome you and invite you to make your presentation. Thank you.
Marie and the members of the Conflict Resolution and Legal Committee and members of the Red Cross, of course, Mr. Pierre, the president, and his the leaders of the organization in St. Lucia. I want to address all distinguished ladies and gentlemen, those especially invited, those online, those in the studio audience, which I think I have seen. And thank you very much, Deborah Maloney, who I've met fairly briefly, but we did meet at some particular point in time in St. Lucia. I see a lot of other familiar names, but I do not want to spend a lot of time because a lot of time has already been spent in the introductory process, and I want to try to get into the nitty-gritty of the evening's function. My understanding is that we are to be talking about promoting peaceful resolution through community engagement. And I like the topic.
Recording in progress.
Of course, we have to understand what we mean by community engagement, and it is not something that is very easy, I think, for everyone to understand, and it is not something that automatically happens because one is involved in conflict resolution or in mediation, as the case may be. I have tried to put together a presentation which sort of touches on the surface, but invites a listening audience to think about the need for engagement in particular areas. And this has to do with the individual conflicts, which relate largely to the growing level of violence in the region. And I'm sure you're familiar with that, St. Lucia. Family and community conflict. Someone mentioned earlier the whole issue of land disputes. And I must say that hits the nail on the head to a large extent, because especially in a community which has a very strong relationship with land, and agricultural land in particular, there is a rich resource for both conflict and conflict resolution. And I move on to the whole issue, which I think will be very interesting for those in the Red Cross to listen to, and which has to do with our peculiar situation in the region, where we are very subject to natural disasters, and question whether or not there is an opportunity there for persons trained in conflict resolution to anticipate those circumstances which may lead to conflict as a result of the aftermath or the damage done by natural disasters, and the process of recovery or mitigation of damage that result from disasters thereafter. I want to speak about protecting people from themselves, and I want to speak about the whole issue of the extent to which one can now, in this day and age, get away with speaking or referring to something as an act of God, as distinct from a failure to act, to protect persons in circumstances where scientific knowledge has led to the ability to predict that we would have certain catastrophes, etc., if individuals are permitted to behave in a particular way. So after that, I conclude. I just wanted, therefore, to itemize these topics because I don't want us to read it word for word, going through it. I try to keep it interesting by dealing with it the way that I have dealt with it. Now, what led me to conflict resolution and mediation, interestingly enough, was early experience in the criminal court. And that early experience, I recall, included a situation, at least one case in which I recall the facts very vividly. An individual was riding a bicycle, something very common in our communities in the region. And as he passed another individual standing on the road, the one standing on the road referred to him as a punk. And as a result, he turned that bicycle around, rode back to the bystander, and stabbed it. And although it may sound like of course, it's a very serious offense, but some people might think it is kind of petty in the sense that, well, this individual didn't die. It is injury. He suffered some injury, but they were not the most serious injuries. But that was not the point. The point is, why would the cyclist have been led to think that his response was an appropriate response to somebody calling him a punk? And at the bottom of that whole discussion is another discussion which is very, very prevalent out there right now, not just in St. Lucia, in Barbados as well, and I think throughout the region, where individuals are actually committing murder because they feel that someone has dissed them or disrespected them. And that, of course, that situation with the cyclists had to do with what that individual considered to be a diss. I recall a murder case that I dealt with in which that was the exact language used when this individual left home at 6 o'clock in the morning, went to the victim's house, saw the victim's brother, told the victim's brother that he wanted to speak to the victim. Victim came out, he spoke to him for about 2 minutes and then shot him point blank in his chest and walked away, blowing the smoke from the top of his firearm, from the muzzle. Again, the so-called reason for that action was a gang diss. The gang leader had been dissed, and he sent this individual to do this, commit this murder, basically to teach a lesson that he must not be disrespected. What culture, what value system leads to the idea that respect, or somebody's idea of respect or disrespect, is so enormous that it is worthy of such a violent response and elevated to a level where one becomes willing to take a life. So this is both an opportunity and a challenge. And this is where the issue of engagement comes in. Because unfortunately, when we deal with it purely as a criminal matter, and as I said, when I started out thinking about conflict resolution, I was actually a prosecutor. What do you think? When we think of it purely as a criminal matter, the discussion of the issues involved ends when you either successfully prosecute leading to incarceration or find some kind of punishment, or if there's not enough evidence, then you let the person go as an innocent person because, of course, they weren't proven guilty. And it stops there. Nobody talks about it anymore. Nobody tries to look beyond the moment when this thing happened to actually get the, because from one end, there's the assumption that maybe it didn't happen, although somebody died or somebody was injured, or if it happened for other reasons, and so on and so forth. So the whole question then of engagement is basically to lead to clarification of these kinds of incidents and to hopefully collection of sufficient information of circumstances, etc., that would lead to methodologies that could bring about resolution rather than that kind of conflict, so that an individual faced with a so-called diss knows that he can do like what Michael Jackson said and beat it, or just move on, forget about it, rather than responding in the way that that particular cyclist did. So as a mediator or conflict resolution practitioner, one would want to be able to see how you could discourage the kind of reaction that I spoke about. But you wouldn't be able to do that effectively if there hasn't been some process of digging in to find out what really was behind this kind of behavior. Why would an individual have come to the point where they thought that this was an appropriate response? And I would just leave that there for the time being. But this is what I think I would understand community engagement to mean in those kind of circumstances. Are we digging in? Are we really trying to find out what it is, or what are the influences that are leading to these kinds of behaviors? It's easy to say it's TV and it's this body and it's the influence of drugs and it's American culture and so on and so forth. But why is it so easy for this to catch on? And I think that we have to continue to ask those kinds of questions and then see how we can respond. Moving on to the issue of, as somebody raised the issue of land. Certainly, when I applied for the fellowship that I received in 2014, I had spent some time in St. Lucia, and I had encountered a number of cases in the civil court now. Moving on, you have the criminal court situation and you have the civil court situation. Of course, both of them are centers where there's a lot of conflict being dealt with. And what I discerned from looking at the number of cases having to do with land was that cultural change was taking place in the old traditional village communities, and that people were moving away from the idea of family land as a resource for family. Everybody subsists, everybody, benefits from it, everybody in the family. Of course, unless the family itself is divided, which happens as a result sometimes of the fact that, there's more than one parent, and so on. There's, and that causes division. But I think what I was able to discern was that there's also another cause of division. There's the division that happens when somebody decides, well, that old traditional framework is no longer helpful to them, and they want to be able to use land now as a wealth builder and move away from that whole traditional framework, create their own lot, build a better house, and so on, probably use the land to get a loan for business, etc., etc. None of these things are negative, but they can be looked upon negatively by other persons who once thought of land use in a totally different way. And that is the idea that I came up with. That what we have is a conflict between a part of the community that wants to maintain an old traditional way of looking at land, and another part that wants to move away from that and do what do what a lot of people now have begun to do, which is to use land as a resource for building wealth. And therefore it means that it has to be individualized. You have to now have your own lot. You have to have total control over that lot and be able to have a relationship now with a bank, etc., that now dictates how that development takes place to some extent. So that is one view, and I'm saying what I'm trying to do is to say, I invite you to come up with your own views. I invite you to look at these circumstances as somebody identified the land issue as one of those very important conflict issue areas. And I said, well, okay, why you think so? Okay, and again, the invitation to engage is to find out more. Look at it more closely. Talk to people who are of the traditional view, or maybe they're mixed views. Talk to others and see where you think the differences are. Of course, as I said, sometimes the differences are based on other things that happen in the family. The man in the house had more than one family, and there's a feud because some people feel that they are legitimate, other people feel they're not legitimate, etc. And the whole question of how to deal with that is a source of conflict as well. Interestingly enough, I was listening to an interview not too long ago between an American journalist and the sister of Barack Obama, former president of the United States. And the American journalist persisted in referring to the Barack Obama as this lady's half brother. And after she had done it a couple of times, the lady said, in Kenya, we don't do halves. He is my brother. And I just wanted to leave you with that consideration, because it just shows how a different cultural approach could probably put a different perspective on something. Well, we don't do halves. What do you mean by half? Why is that important? And again, we have to start doing some digging, some engagement, some discussion, etc. How you frame it, you who are knowledgeable of these situations in your own community. You know, one of the things that I learned as I did conflict resolution is that the expert is always somebody from the place where they're trying to resolve the conflict. That is where you are the expert. You don't need anybody from outside to give you expertise on your conflicts. You are the expert, but you have to be aware of what's going on around you. There has to be a certain level of awareness, and there has to be the ability to, or the willingness to challenge certain things, challenge certain assumptions, challenge certain so-called truths, and see if you can find a way of getting to the bottom of some of these problems. I move on to the natural disaster issue, and I would thought that this is of some interest to the Red Cross. Well, only a couple of days ago, I was speaking to a former head of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Organization, who is a friend of mine, went to school with me here in Barbados, and two other persons who have dealt with disasters in the region. And we had a very interesting discussion about a lot of the things that happen as in their work situation, and the not that they necessarily blow up as national conflicts or anything like that, but the opportunities that are there for helping to ensure that resources that are deployed after a natural disaster are properly deployed and shared, and that the community benefits across the board, that proper plans are put in place for disaster mitigation in the future, and the management in the future, etc. These are some of the important issues that eventually will be confronted by conflict situations, by persons who have different views, by persons who do not necessarily want to go about the tasks that they have in conflict in disaster mitigation in a proper way, and as a result cause conflict. One of the things that they mentioned, interestingly enough, is that on some occasions they find themselves being told that, well, not directly, but that they're not basically not trusted as individuals who are working on the behalf of government institutions, and that the donors may prefer to give the money to the Red Cross. The individual actually said that. So maybe someone from the Red Cross can explain what's going on there. But I think it's important to be very frank about these things and have that conversation as to why you think that might have happened. One can, of course, immediately focus on the question of accountability issues, and accountability is always something that causes conflict because some people don't want to be accountable. Accountability means that you have to be open, you have to actually measure things and actually count stuff and actually say what you're doing, and not hide anything. And that's not easy for some people to deal with. So accountability issues arise after natural disasters. And we are countries that are very disaster prone. Somebody mentioned earlier, well, I think it was in the introductory video done by the Red Cross, that we are dealing with issues of climate change. And as we deal with these issues of climate change, it is kind of predicted that these disasters will increase, that they will become more and more serious, which would mean that we have more and more conflicts that are arising in this area. So we should be prepared for them. Okay, so I want to move on now to the whole question of people protecting themselves. We have, in all of the countries where I've worked, institutions that try to make orders as to how development is to take place, etc., how it should not be done, etc. And one of the things that struck me, that maybe I was unfortunate to start to reside in St. Lucia in the year of Thomas. But one of the things that struck me, and followed soon thereafter by the Christmas Eve trough, was that some of these developmental restrictions, when they are not abided by, result in deaths. Persons who build too close to the river, persons who build close to a cliff, or a cliffside, or land that is very subject to erosion, landslides, etc., etc. And yet these things happen over and over. And there is the old adage that, well, boy, nobody's to blame, these are acts of God. Well, the law developing internationally in the European Union and there are some cases in the Latin America is moving away from that idea of an act of God and is saying to the state, you're responsible. You're responsible. You must not allow people to go and build in a location which is dangerous to them. So, people have to be encouraged to act on their own behalf. People have to um, be protected from themselves because everybody wants to be able to go and do as they like, but they don't realize that, what these organizations sometimes are doing are they're trying to protect people from circumstances that will arise as a result of them, of natural processes like landslides, like floods, rivers overflowing their banks, and so on. I had seen that happen once in Barbados in how many years, but I've seen it happen in St. Lucia more than once, and in a short space of time. So it just shows how the topography could be different and cause different emphases in terms of what is needed. And that is what I'm talking about when you say, if you call that an act of God, if you know that this thing is going to happen, why are you blaming God? You know it's going to happen, right? You have a responsibility to stop it from happening. These are significant challenges, and of course, persons have to learn how to be forthright and deal with these things as upfront as possible. That is a learning process in itself. I had the opportunity to see how institutions could come together in a big city like New York after Hurricane Sandy, and where the state and some private sector organizations and insurance companies and so on get together to ensure that after a disaster like that, people can actually rebuild their houses, etc., repair damage, etc. But even in that kind of sophisticated atmosphere, of course, conflict still arises. Some builder doesn't do a good job, and it ends up that a mediator is needed to sort that out. So it just shows how conflict resolution persons can play a crucial role in any kind of situation that you can think about. So we have to learn to anticipate these conflicts. We have to learn to dig deeper. Yes, the courts are there to do a certain type of conflict resolution, to do a certain a kind of resolving of things that happen in the society and imposing the law. But a lot of times they don't really resolve things. They leave certain problems hanging. They punish, they impose the civil damages or whatever, but that does not necessarily resolve the conflict situations that have given rise to certain behaviors. So I'm trying to draw to your attention that there are various areas in community life, in the lives of young people and so on, that will have an impact, an influence on their behavior and the way in which conflict will arise. I recall in another island spending some time talking to people about the way people speak to each other, loose language, which normalizes hostility, anger, and violence. Well, if that is part of the way in which you express yourself, why are you surprised that people move quickly in that direction when there's a conflict situation? When I was able to observe in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, New York, the Save Our Streets situation, that was one of the ways they were brought into being by coming to the conclusion that what was needed most in their particular community was not a mediation service outlet, but an outlet to stop people from retaliating against violent outbursts. So there's there's violence committed against A's family wants to respond. These people are trained to go and intervene to stop that from happening. And in some places, they're called interveners. I'm told that in some Caribbean countries, they have started to use these interveners to try to deal with the conflict that is arising as a result of the growing criminal violence. So this is an instance where you can see how individuals adapted. No, we don't need an ordinary conflict resolution. We don't need an ordinary mediation center. What we need is somebody to focus specifically, this is what these people were saying, on the issue of dealing with retaliation when there are violent acts. So I want to end there. I hope that I have encouraged you to dig deeper when things that bother you in relation to conflict in the society arise, and that as a result, you would understand the limitations of some of the major institutions, including the court system. You would understand some of the limitations of mediation itself and conflict resolution as a practice, unless you're willing to dig deeper, unless you're willing to engage. And I think that's really less the issue of engagement with the community arises. Unless you're willing to engage, listen, ask questions, have meetings or whatever you wish to call it, workshops where you find out more about what is happening in various communities that can enlighten and lead to resolution. Okay? So generally, I want to end by saying I'm therefore inviting you to open yourself to the enormous potential of human relationships. What I mean by that is you can't enter into a relationship and hope that there will be no change. If the relationship is to work, there's going to have to be change. And therefore, relationships are really the university, the education ground, the real storeroom of education that will lead to better conflict resolution. The more you understand your own relationships, the more you understand the importance of building relationships, the more you want to try to understand the difficulties in the relationships that you have, I think the better you will get at digging and engaging and leading and adopting skills and methodologies that will lead to better conflict resolution. So that is my presentation, and I will await discussion when the time comes. Thank you very much.
Overwhelming round of applause. Come on, give it up for Justice Bell. Justice Bell, I want to thank you for that very personal insight into conflict, listening, relationships. You never fail to surprise us with your antidotes. And we do look forward to digging deeper on the panel with some of the insights. Thank you. Marva.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. At this point, I wish to introduce our panel. Dr. Stephen King, Mr. Hubert Pierre, and Justice Francis Bell will serve as our panelists, and our moderator, Mr. Joseph. It's all over to you, Lisa.
And I want to start with Dr. King because I think amongst us all here, you have really been a champion on the ground over the last 2 decades, really working in our communities and really interfacing with the community. And Justice Bell mentioned, community engagement, and I think he was really trying to get into what that definition, what it really means. Because sometimes we bang these terms around, but there isn't really that depth, as you were saying. How do we really define these things for us to get the best out of it? Throughout your years doing this sort of thing, how would you define community engagement in the context of what the Red Cross wants to do?
Okay, so good evening. Justice Bell, it's lovely to hear and see you again. Where we have been involved is really in violent conflicts. That's where RISE has been doing its work. And it's since 2009 we've been involved in that. Now, how do we get into community engagement, or how do we have community engagement? What happens is usually a conflict will come to our attention through our network. It could be a community conflict or individual conflict. What we do is we find who can be a trusted, what we call credible messenger. Because you cannot intervene in any conflict unless you are with people that the community itself trusts and they are willing to engage with. So that's the first condition for community engagement. What the process we then use is actually to sort of interrogate the conflict on each side. So that's, again, part of the engagement. So what we do is, if I'll give you an example of, for instance, maybe our Bel Air conflict resolution that we were doing many years ago, where what you do is you meet Upper Bel Air community with the credible messengers that are there, have the forums, find out exactly what are the perceptions and what are the positions and what are the reasons behind the conflict. How do they see the other side? How do they see themselves, and why are there problems? Same thing on the other side. And then what we try to do is find the common ground. What do both sides agree they would like to achieve? We discuss with each side also options that they may have other than violence to solve their problems. So what other options are available to you? And then we can bring people together, so we get the two conflicting communities into engagement on this common ground, understanding both sides, understanding the perceptions and the needs of both sides and the desires of both sides. And of course, in that common ground, we seek a win-win solution, or at the very least, because the nice thing about mediation or conflict resolution is that you can find win-win as opposed to a win-lose situation. Win-win is perfect. If you can't get win-win, at least we can get a compromise that both sides are prepared to give up to gain the peace that they all desire. And I must tell you, everybody, in my experience, nobody likes violence. Violence is seen as the method that they resort to because they don't have another option in their mind. They don't have another option. Once you can create valid options, people will not resort to violence. That is the belief that we use.
But Justice Bell said something that was really poignant when he talked about the culture and value system and the idea of, well, it's forever changing, and we'll get to talk about that in a bit. But he pointed out the idea of people wanting respect. And that always seems to be at the center of the conflict, especially when it comes to violence. How then do you create that win-win situation when one would perhaps believe that there's no one who's being wrong or right in this situation, that I am not affirmed in my belief that you wronged me?
Yeah. And respect is something that is fundamental in any trust relationship. And respect also has to come from you as somebody who's engaging with the community. You have to respect community, even if you believe that a community may be wrong, or a person may be wrong, but respect. Because if you don't respect them, you'll not have good communication, which is fundamental to any resolution. Secondly, you will not ever truly understand why they did something. I don't believe in wrong and right. I believe that things happen, and there's good and bad things that happen. And people, generally speaking, act as they believe is in their best interest to act as they should. Justice Bell mentioned about retaliation, and this is one of the big issues. You have hurt me, you have killed one of my loved ones. That becomes a blood debt. And I want to revenge by making one of yours die, or you, right? And to get people to a point, yes, it was wrong to have somebody killed. But there's going to be a story as to how that killing happened. It didn't happen arbitrarily. There was a process that resulted in that killing. And when we understand the entire process, sometimes, and we have been able to do this, is get people to a point where they understand, because they do understand how the killing happened, and then can you get to a place where you can see an option where the revenge killing is not the best option. Because the consequences of revenge killing, as we've heard so many times in the communities we go to, where does it stop? I kill one of you, you kill one of me, I kill two of you, you kill two of me. Where are we going with that? And once people begin to see that that is not the way to go, and we must find another solution, then you can get a stop to retaliation. And sometimes you can even get to a place of forgiveness where people can actually, which is really a great place to get to. We don't always get there, but sometimes you can get to a place of forgiveness. And in the communities that we've got to that place of forgiveness, that's when we've had the best resolutions. I have a young man in the very first conflict resolution in 2009 with came out of Sir Ira Simmons, but it was actually New Village, George Charles Boulevard, and Conway, involved in a three-way war. Man was stabbed, young boy was stabbed, and it's only when that young boy could face the person who stabbed him and said, you know something, I forgive you, because I want this thing to stop. This war must stop, we must stop. And when that happened, the whole conflict settled. So sometimes we have to get to that place of forgiveness. And that can only happen through good communication, good understanding, and great engagement of the key people that are involved in the conflict.
I want to bring him back, Justice Bell, and ask that you mentioned, Justice Bell, about the limitations of mediation. And I wonder how this limitation, especially given that it's non-binding, and people want to know that, we love the court process, because then you have some definitive steps that are taken. But through mediation, it's not, it's not binding. How do we now begin to get people, based on what Dr. King has said, how do we get communities to accept the outcome of mediations?
It's I think, let's not get bogged down with what you call it. If what Dr. King is doing is intervening in conflict situations, and that intervener maybe had some kind of training, maybe not, but they are able to get people to arrive at a resolution, that person is a mediator. As a result, what he's reporting is that he's seen successful mediation. What makes it binding? It makes sense. That's what makes it binding. When the parties consider the cost of not arriving at a resolution, they come to the conclusion that it's really time to arrive at an agreement about the way forward. Now, sometimes the agreements may not last forever. Sometimes there may be something that causes them to break out again or whatever, and you have to be prepared for that. But because people's circumstances can change, individuals can interfere and deliberately go out of their way to destabilize something that had become stable. and as a result, you don't get an agreement that sticks. So it is not just, I mean, a mediation in the court system can be made binding, by the way, by simply making it into a court order. And as long as it becomes a court order, whoever breaches that court order can be punished by the court. So it can be made binding, but the original concept, of course, is for it to be the principles involved would guide people to want to resolve the situation. If you start out by saying, well, we must find a binding solution, individuals may start to think in more legal ways and so on, and we got to go back to the law then and see the law is the thing that's binding, and sometimes clearly that doesn't work. So when we get to the issue of what is binding, the main thing sometimes is what makes sense. But if it is through the court, it can be made binding. Or it can be binding for a period of time, but you have to look out for when things can change. And then as a result, you have to start all over again, or you have to use different tactics to stop it from being destabilized. So that's how we would deal with the issue of whether it's binding or not. One of the things that some people who have gone through mediation say is that actually sometimes agreements that are arrived at by mediation are more binding than contracts that are, done at so-called arm's length, because the process that was involved in arriving at the win-win situation or a compromise leads to a feeling that they own it. They own the resolution. They own the what has come out of the mediation, and that is what makes it binding. Right? They're not looking at it from the point of view, this is somebody else's idea of a resolution. This is our own idea of a resolution. So that is something that needs to be sold to the persons involved in the mediation. That this is your work. This is your accomplishment. It is as strong as you make it. And if you do that, the possibility that it will become binding even without a court order or entering into a contract, it could be there. But there's always the facility to turn it into a contract or a court order, and therefore it can be enforced if that happens. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does, and I see that Dr. King was nodding in agreement there, especially when he spoke about. Go ahead, I'll let you say it.
I like this very much, Justice Bell, because a lot of times we do mediations between gangs that have been in conflict, and people say, "Oh, the peace treaty. You all signed a peace treaty." I have never been part of a signing of any peace treaty between anybody. Right? I've never seen that happen. Because I tell them, the peace is signed in your heart. And it is how you live and breathe the resolution of the conflict every day that is going to maintain it, not a piece of paper. And so I like what you say. I do agree it can always be made binding. We can always have a piece of paper. But the most important thing, and the other thing you said, Justice Bell, which I think is very important, it's an organic process. This resolution is an organic process of people going through their pain and their suffering, expressing themselves to one another, and together healing. It's really a health thing, which I guess why I'm involved. It's a kind of healing process. We even call it the cure violence approach to a thing. So you have to, it takes time. It takes expressions of emotions, and it takes expressions of love at the end of the day for one another, and love for peace that people inherently have. But we have to see our way to that this is what needs to be done. And so I I don't believe in the papers as such. I do agree with Justice Bell. Yes, we could get it in the court, but I think it's more important that the people themselves believe it.
Yeah, when the people get involved, then they see it as their solution. We're going to get to some of the questions coming off the platform. And I have a question here, so either Dr. King or Justice Bell can chime in. Considering that there is a great distrust of the police in the communities throughout the island, how therefore are mediators and facilitators viewed and treated? Are they seen as being informers or facilitators for meaningful change? It's a loaded one.
I'll defer to my elder, Dr. Bell, Dr. Justice Bell, and then I will answer after you, sir.
Are you with us, Justice Bell?
I think I understand the question. It is. I certainly don't want to say anything negative about the police. They try their best. This is one of the areas in which people have to dig to try to understand what is happening. But the police role is coming from it's a state institution, and therefore there are authorities and so on behind the directions, the policies, etc., of the police. Now, in the circumstances where I was able to ask questions about the interveners, those institutions, those groups who have decided to go in that direction, made agreements with the police, and the police in those circumstances, so the police have to be sophisticated enough to say, listen, let's see if this can work. Let's see if we can actually see a reduction in crime, in violent crime, based on this community action that is happening here, rather than going after X immediately and or asking people to reveal in things that they are told, etc., etc. So they're not totally ignorant of what is happening. They try to remain informed, but they don't intervene in the usual way if that process of trying to resolve conflict, say between gangs or whatever, shows possible success, shows the possibility of success. So in those circumstances, they might be willing to sit back and say, look, yeah, we are the law enforcement agency, but we realize that this thing is bearing fruit, so we will allow this to operate. And clearly, things that are said, I do not know what Dr. King's experience is. I'm sure that there are things that he would not repeat, but things that are said in certain confidential situations cannot be repeated, cannot be disclosed to anybody. What you have to be able to sell to the authorities is that this thing works, that it actually reduces the amount of violent crime, and that is something that is positive for the society, and therefore maybe you should allow it to work. There are always going to be different views about those things, but I think that by and large we have to be willing to look at it from the point of view of wanting to, as much as possible, bring about peace in the community. And sometimes that can't happen, as Dr. King pointed out, without forgiveness. And forgiveness is not the bringing, as one gentleman in St. Kitts used to tell me all the time, bring down the hammer. Forgiveness is not always, is not necessarily bringing down the hammer. Forgiveness is a totally different process. And if it achieves the results that lead to peace, then the question is, maybe you'll be able to convince the members of the police force to cooperate with that process to some extent. They can't do it 100%, but to some extent, and watch it work. Okay, if it doesn't work, then they can still intervene.
Thank
So
you
that's
for that, Justice Bell. Time will escape from us, so I'm going to give you about 45 seconds, and then we'll move on to some of the questions.
The police have a very important force in what we do. We have a good understanding with the police. Now, when we do conflict management, there are boundaries. So, and actually the communities and individuals know very well they don't share information with us, which is evidentiary for prosecution purposes. So we are not privy to information that could be given to the police for prosecution. We are dealing with a situation and forces and ideas and feelings that have caused problems. It's not that important that Mr. Pierre killed Lisa. That's not the issue that's important for us. It is that Lisa died. And now we need to find a way to resolve this problem. So we work closely with the police, but it's not a informer for prosecution relationship. And I think the police have that understanding too, because the police also want to reduce crime and violence. And they see, I believe that the majority of the police, not all, majority of the police see these kinds of interventions as valuable.
Okay. And I want to bring in Mr. Hubert Pierre into the discussion. We have a question here that was posted, and I'm like-minded with this individual here. And the question is, are there similar arrangements to this one being proposed by the Red Cross? And how have those fared, if you know? And how successful, or what it is that you're looking forward to, that this movement that you have started will be able to impact in communities?
I want to say that this is pilot. We have never seen or heard this thing in the Red Cross. And for us, we know all relationships, so generally everything should be built on trust. The Red Cross itself as an organization, if people cannot trust the Red Cross, nothing goes forward. We are under our emblem itself, which is protective. Okay, it's indicative and protective. So understanding the whole gambit of this and what happens with people, relationship, violence, etc. I am sitting here and I'm listening to Dr. Bell continuing speaking about disaster preparedness and relationship and this type of thing. And these are things we see daily from the Red Cross point of view. I mean, I'm a specialist in this. And I have encountered many situations where, for example, you would tell somebody, I think you'll endanger your life if you build here. And this person is doing it. The reason that they're doing it is because of poverty. They can't do better. But by the same token, we are willing to help them do better. But then the powers that be would say, stay there, don't worry with them. And then you become the sufferer. So how do we handle this? So the Red Cross understanding full well what is needed in preventing things from escalating, because they exist. You can't pretend as though they're not there. They're there. With this committee, I think we work with the ICRC, International Committee of Red Cross, and we use all the laws, humanitarian laws, etc., under which we work. So all of this is part and parcel of what we do generally. And I think this is an addition that the Red Cross can do with, and it will enable us to do our work much better.
So just tell us, how will the committee be functioning? Give us some of what that structure would be like in terms of how people can access the services of the committee.
It's in its embryonic stage, and the best person to answer this question, I can tell you, is Anne-Marie. She's smiling her head off, but she will have to answer you.
Anne-Marie, you care to give us
Come
a
on.
quick response?
I think I've been put in it. As we say, this is embryonic. We want to launch, and we have a family of very competent mediators and legal practitioners. And with your help, we're going to put it together. So we're not actually getting ready till the end of September. We have a month, 2 months to put the program and the protocols in place. So it's a case of watch this space.
Right.
Doesn't answer your question, but it's a rolling, new, exciting initiative. And together we're going to bring it together.
No, it's on its way. So
It's
that's
on
an
its
answer
way.
enough.
Yes.
Once we
And
know
when
it's
you
happening.
come back to us at the end of December, a new baby is born.
To be able to add it and to assist Dr. King in all that he has been doing with the RISE. I want to ask you, Mr. Pierre, as we get into wrap up, there is a community open day that's going to be happening August 11. Can you give us some more information on that, the services that will be there, what can people expect and where it's taking place?
A few things I need to tell you, or the thing I need to tell you immediately, instantly, that we have to postpone it because of certain developments. Okay, so that's what I want to tell you immediately. Not that it's our fault. And I want everybody to understand that. Everybody is listening to us. I don't want anybody to decide I'm going there and then to abruptly hear that this thing is cancelled. So the best place to do it is now. It has been postponed for the future. And I think it's going to happen very, very soon. We may have to change location, etc., but it's going to happen because we are determined.
All right. So I want to thank you gentlemen, Dr. King, Mr. Pierre. I want to say a very big thank you to Justice Bell.
Yes.
Thank you so much for those profound thoughts that you gave us there, and we're looking forward to seeing how your advice to the committee, how they'll be able to get that and put it into action. So thank you so much for that, and I've been very happy to moderate this discussion. And I want to say congratulations to the St. Lucia Red Cross for going down this line, and as you see, it's the first. And so we'll be seeing how the fruits bear. So thank you very much. Marva, it's back to you, and to Anne-Marie as well.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to Justice Bell. It was a very engaging discussion. I've learned a lot with regards to Dr. King's work. I mean, I've been around Dr. King, but I didn't realize how deep some of the work is. And to Justice Bell, thank you so very much for being able to offer your insight from a legal perspective, but also from a humanitarian perspective when you speak of disasters. We now invite Ms. Petra Nelson to the podium. Anne-Marie will welcome you.
Yes, we're nearing the end of our program, and we're just getting fired up.
Yeah, I understand.
Correct?
Yeah.
I think it was just getting very warm in here. Shame we have to end it, but we have to go home at some stage. But before we go, it's important to reflect on some of the key messages that we've heard tonight. Key messages, where are we going from here? And I'd like to invite my colleague, Edith Petra Nelson, to give us an overview. Over to you, Petra.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Distinguished guests and Justice Bell, it was nice to see you. Dr. King, I haven't seen you in a while, so it was nice to see you also. Mr. Pierre. Members of the Conflict Resolution and Legal Committee, and all those who have joined us. I just feel very elated by this group. When I agreed with Anne-Marie, I did not know what I was getting into. All I know is that I'm always happy to help and to do something to assist our community. But having heard the discourse today, it is clear that the establishment of the Conflict Resolution and Legal Committee by the Red Cross marks a significant step towards addressing conflict with compassion and understanding, and humanity, which is one of the main words used by the Red Cross. As Mr. Pierre stated, the Red Cross was born of war. And it has been globally, as far as I'm concerned, noted as being reactionary. But with the launch of this committee, The Red Cross is showing its commitment to peace in a transformative, multifaceted manner by being proactive and pursuing conflict from its root before any violence erupts. The key takeaways we have from this invigorating discussion is that mediation is required and advantageous and can be used in various ways to quell conflict, whether within a family, community, politically, or among sovereign nations. We heard our esteemed guest speaker and panelists speak about the good of mediation. It promotes peace. It prevents violence. It empowers parties. It avoids imprisonment. I wanted to say that one of the things that struck me was Dr. King speaking about the trusted messenger. I must say I was not aware of that, because we think as mediators we are the middleman or middle person, but we do not realize that because of the dynamism of our world and how things are changing, that mediation cannot just be a mediator sitting there. And we now have to start looking forward and analyzing manners in which we can deal with conflict in a completely different way. And I actually made a note of everything that you said, and that you have to have the trusted messenger, then you have you have to get common ground. Then you have to bring the warring factions together, which is completely different to what people like I am accustomed to as a court-connected mediator. We get the people to come there and we try to speak. So we the messenger, we the middle ground, we the everything, trying to generate the options. However, it is important because one of the main things, which is important to us, is that especially with the type of violence we have in St. Lucia now, this is needed. We need to realize, and this committee, and I think that those of us who are members of the committee and looking forward to more people joining this committee, we can see that it is not just business as usual, that there will be different things we will have to learn, we will have to analyze, as Justice Bell had stated, that you have to look forward and see how best to deal with all different situations. Because we do not only have the conflict, like individual conflicts, like what Justice Bell spoke about in relation to a law-abiding citizen, just because he's called a name can go and become a criminal, commit murder. We have to look at our cultural differences, the fact that a lot of our people they have this pride and this need for revenge and retaliation. And these are things that are not, the Bible says that pride comes before destruction. You know, I have to add that. And what we have to realize is that we have to come together. We have to be kind. Kindness, there have to be respect, and not respect to buff up ourselves and say, I must be respected because of who I am, whether I'm a gang leader or I'm a leader or in the community or something. But mutual respect for human beings is what is important. And this is what we can then come together so we can quell the conflicts which really now are literally trying to destroy our country. I also took away, and I would ask others to take away, the strengths of relationships, because in a mediation, and when you're doing conflict resolution, parties are free to come in, you vent. We always say you must have respect for each other, but you vent. So you have the opportunities. It might be a land dispute, but in that land dispute can have, the genesis of it can be something very different. And these are the things that people have to understand. It can be something that happened as children. Somebody stole somebody's marbles and they vexed them for the rest of their life. And for some reason or other, there's an issue with land. And the next thing you know, there's a cutlass and people are, as Justice Bell said, because I do a lot of land matters, and the culture of land in St. Lucia, people believe that because it's family land, everybody must be on it. And people do not understand that at some point, land has to be partitioned. It has to be separated. Everybody wants their own little piece of land for them to get their own little wealth and to go to the bank, because now they want to educate their children. And these are the kinds of things in a community, in a family, that requires conflict resolution and requires mediation. So I am just asking everyone to understand that also that mediation empowers you. You make the decision. You make the decision to be bound by certain conduct. So if there's a fight and then you decide, well, I will compromise and we will reach a decision, you live with that decision. It is not a decision which is imposed on you by the court or by the police arresting you. You're not going to prison. And that is why conflict resolution and mediation is so important. And we are asking that, we get a lot of people on board. We want our country to be better. And by being better, it is for us to understand mankind, for us to understand and respect each other, each other's rights. And these are the things that are important just to live comfortably in a country and in a community. And as Justice Bell spoke about the breach of laws, and we saw it, and he spoke about in Thomas, that the places people are building, they are breaching laws, and you have that conflict, and they're unable and they're not prepared to take the advice of others. And as a result of that, they suffer as a result of it. Apart from natural, then you have the natural disasters, where you also have the issues with the resource, getting relief, and the manner in which resources are distributed. And as a result of that, you have both cultural and political conflict. And because of that, people feel that they're not being treated properly, and then that causes conflict in a community. All these matters, all these issues do not have to be settled in violence, in the court, in neighbors being vexed with each other for life, carrying guns or cutlasses. All these issues can be resolved by mediation. Once parties come in and they understand what is important, that they because ready to just live a peaceful life with your neighbor. You don't want to be passing your neighbor and vex and cutting eyes for the neighbor. You want to be able to smile and say, good morning. You want to, I remember being young and knowing that you could go to your neighbor for sugar. These days, you don't even know who your neighbor is, And these are the things that are important. And these are the things that we have to take with us to realize that there is no situation that cannot be resolved by decency, by coming together, and by having a conversation and being able to compromise one way or the other. I want to thank everybody who has joined us, and I ask that we all do our part and to be part of this journey, this exciting journey. And I look forward to being, and I met some of my Red Cross fellows for the first time today, so I was quite excited about that. And I look forward, I see some who I have known before and was not aware that they were members. And so we look forward to this journey and whatever we do being done for the betterment of our people and our country. I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. I could see the beam on your face indicating how happy you are. Well done with your summary. And I too look forward to working with you. And I also look forward to Anne-Marie welcoming Kirian.
Well, can you believe it? We're at the end. It's the start of a journey. But within any journey, you have to express gratitude.
Thank you.
And we're going to ask our colleague, Carrie-Anne, to express gratitude on our behalf. She's online, so if I can ask you to pin her, please. Carrie-Anne, over to you.
Everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good evening. On behalf of the Red Cross Conflict Resolution and Legal Committee, I would like to acknowledge and extend thanks to all those who contributed to making this evening's launch a success. First and foremost, we give thanks to the Almighty for giving us life and the ability to make this event possible. Our distinguished guest speaker, Justice Bell, for accepting our invitation to deliver remarks on the theme. We were enlightened by your insight as you encourage us to dig deeper. Thank you to our panelists, Mr. Pierre for taking on this initiative, Dr. King for your participation and contribution to the discussion as you stressed on the community engagement process. Thank you. Our moderator, Lisa Joseph, and the GIS team, we say thanks. A heartfelt thanks to everyone who has worked diligently behind the scenes, especially Anne-Marie and Marvel, other members of the Red Cross, Conflict and Legal Committee members. Special thanks to all of you who took time to join the Zoom and for your participation. We are encouraged by your presence. Thank you once again for your support and involvement in making this event a success as we strive to promote peaceful resolutions to conflict through community engagement. May God bless you all. Good night.
On that note, we say good night. Remember, the Red Cross provides hope and help, and we welcome you all on this journey. Good night.